Hello and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Riffe Gallery. This is a spotlight on the Riffe with the Ohio Channel, and today we're going to have a look at Quilt National 2025 with exhibitions director at the Dairy Barn, Erin McKenna. All right, Erin, so Quilt National is a pretty important exhibition coming from the Dairy Barn. Can you tell me a little bit about the Dairy Barn and Quilt National?
Yes, the Dairy Barn is a nonprofit art center in southeastern Ohio in Athens. It started in 1978. Prior to that, the barn was built in 1914 and was a working dairy barn housing 200 cows at one point. In the 1960s, it was scheduled for demolition and a group of artists saved it and is now a cultural art center. So Quilt National was the very first exhibition at the Dairy Barn in 1979, and it started from a group of 3 artists who used quilting techniques in their practice, but their work wasn't considered a traditional quilt, and they wanted a venue to exhibit works that were quilts, but more of an artistic expression rather than utilitarian object.
Yeah, so they had a real, a thrust behind that, an idea, a want for the creation of Quilt National. What was that? What were they trying to do by establishing this show?
Yeah, they were trying to frame quilts in the context of art. They wanted people to look at quilts, think about them more conceptually, and see the comparison between quilts and art. And they have succeeded.
Yeah, so something to think about when you're looking at an art form like quilting or any other kind of craft-forward art form is the importance of the hand.
Yes.
And that's important in all art forms, but really specifically quilts.
Yes.
So what is a quilt? How does Quilt National define a quilt?
Yes, okay, so traditionally quilts are technically 3 layers. Think about a fabric sandwich, if you will. The top layer is usually pieced, more decorative. So pieced means fabric that is different colors and patterns cut into different shapes combined to make an image or a pattern. The middle layer is batting. It kind of is the fluff, the meat of the quilt, and then there's a backing layer. At Quilt National, the definition of our quilts is we say it has to be made of 2 layers of fabric or fabric-like material, and it needs to be stitched or fused together.
All right, so Erin, what that does is allow a little bit of room for play. Mm-hmm. Some conceptual things come in, some unexpected materials and approaches, and I'm really excited for you all to see some of these.
This work is done by Heidi Parks, and it won the award for Best Handwork. So that means that every single stitch you made was done by hand with a needle and thread. Heidi's work really focuses on material. So a lot of quilters are very aware of fabric, aware of material, and the memory that material holds. So from the time we are born to the time we die, we are usually wrapped in fabric. So fabric is a very special material. Heidi uses a lot of materials that are near and dear to her heart. There's fabric here from her dad's shirt, an old silk dress, fabric she's gotten from her travels. It kind of seems like there's a lot of vignettes happening. There's kind of abstract patterns over here with these colorful dots. There's representational imagery, and then the closer you get, the more you realize that there are different kinds of materials. Even the thread is maybe even cotton or silk thread. We're seeing really beautiful moments where there are teeny tiny little weavings happening here versus appliqued fabric. You get up closer and you can see the seams of this pink fabric here. So for example, there is a large oval shape cut out. It is very, very similar in color, but just slightly different. And these nuances are really special when you start to get up close to the work. Another thing that I want to point out about hand work is how very, very labor intensive it is. And I think that hand quilting is also kind of a nice reaction to our fast-paced digital world that is so technology-driven. Doing something by hand is not efficient. It is very labor-intensive and time-intensive. So to take the time to really slow down and focus stitch by stitch really invites the viewer to come in and really take that time to slow down as well. Heidi Parks refers to these quilts as diary quilts. So I like to think about journaling or sketchbook and this kind of stream of consciousness that happens. There's no definite end goal, it's just to kind of be in the moment, which is really special too.
Tell us about this piece.
Yes, this is John Levelholtz. John lives in Athens, and his work has actually been in Quilt National many times. This is always the piece that people would ask me about, and they are like, this isn't a quilt, how is this in the show? And in fact, it is a quilt by the definition of Quilt National, so there are at least 2 layers of fabric, and we can also see there are stitch lines in here. It's used with monofilament, so they're very invisible. But the most exciting part about this is the use of light in the piece. And you can see these LED colors, they're moving, and it's actually, the light is responding to my voice, it responds to sound. The bigger the sound, the kind of more extreme the movement will happen. I also like to think about the light. We talk about in Quilt National that something needs to pierce all layers of fabric, and I think that light is technically, it's in the back and it's piercing the layers of fabric as well.
So conceptually, John is really pushing the boundaries, but another thing that I really enjoy thinking about with these works is that interaction. So this quilt is very interactive. If we think of the historic idea of a quilt, that's also, it requires interaction. What we know historically was they were there to keep us warm, either on a bed or to insulate on a wall. So can you talk a little bit more about how you all navigate the idea of use or non-use and how that kind of conceptually plays in the exhibition?
Oh, that's fun to think about, yes. Yeah, so usually utilitarian quilts were almost a consumable object, right? But these works are not meant to be used. They are meant to hang on the wall, to be exhibited like artwork. They're not to be touched, even though people do want to touch them. But yeah, I love that idea of thinking about how the body does interact with this work, but in a very different way. So yeah, just once again, John is really pushing the boundaries and doing a great job.
So here we have the Best in Show quilt. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, this is Shin Hee Chin, and this piece, yes, won Best in Show. I love this piece because from far away, it looks, you could almost read it as a painting, right? I mean, the quality of the light is beautiful, and then the closer you get, you realize that this is made up entirely of thread. So there are layers of fabric here, and this was hand stitched with thread, and it's just this dense, thick layer of thread. So it's almost like thread becomes like a paintbrush stroke or a line from a colored pencil. It just becomes even more abstracted as you get close in. The title of this piece is Latin for the word greenness. So the artist wanted someone to just feel that feeling of when you're engulfed under a canopy of trees, and just that feeling of life and green and liveliness.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal when you get up close. And I think that Shin Hee is doing something really similar to John and pushing the boundaries of what you might allow yourself to consider as a quilt. So it can be fabric-like. So if you pile enough thread together, I suppose that could be
a layer in itself.
Yeah, a layer in itself.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really delightful in this work is there's some really kind of shocking colors that visually blend when you're further away. So when you get up close, there are these really bright cobalts and teals that as you step away, they become soft greens that you see. And you'll see that kind of color mixing in real life if you pay attention, but it's really lovely and obvious when you get up close to the work. You know, folks love to ask artists, how long did this take you?
Yeah, so this piece, just like Heidi's work, it is hand-stitched. So again, the artist is kind of going against that kind of very fast-paced digital world and really slowing down. Something that's kind of nice about slowing down is like, maybe she works on this for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, but then needs to take a break, right? Step away from the work, come back maybe the next day, the next week. And even within that time away from the work, all those things that happen to one's personal life, that will inform her next decision that she makes when she comes back to the piece. So time is kind of a material. The labor involved kind of has its own meaning to it.
Thanks for joining us for this Spotlight on the Riffe with the Ohio Channel here at the Ohio Arts Council's Riffe Gallery. A big thank you to the governor, the legislature, and the Ohio Arts Council's board, all for supporting the arts in Ohio and this great space.